A 75-year-old comedy legend has suddenly become one of the most controversial names in Hollywood. Bill Murray's recent projects have been canceled. Co-stars are reportedly reluctant to work with him. But the real shock isn't just what he's accused of doing, it's how he's responding. At a recent screening, Murray made comments that sent ripples through the industry. Compared to what's trending now, the airport arrest in 1970 and the on-set fights feel almost insignificant. The current accusations span decades, and Murray's reaction has left the internet buzzing. Bill Murray was born on September 21, 1950, in Evanston, Illinois. But his story truly began in Wilmette, inside a cramped, noisy house filled with 9 children and the constant pressure of survival. He was the 5th child, just another Irish Catholic kid wearing hand-me-downs. Armed with a sharp sense of humor and little else, his father, Edward Murray, worked as a lumber salesman, earning modestly while supporting a large family in Catholic school tuition. To help out, the Murray boys carried golf bags at the Indian Hill Club, walking miles for a few dollars that went straight back to the family. The house was always loud and chaotic. But there was one strict rule at the dinner table: if you weren't funny, you did the dishes. Humor wasn't optional, it was survival. In December 1967, everything changed. Edward Murray died from complications related to diabetes at just 46 years old. Bill was only 17. The family's already fragile world suddenly felt heavier. Their mother, Lucille, held everything together, working long hours in a medical supply mailroom, while trying to keep 9 children from falling apart. Bill's brother Brian quit college and returned home. He soon found work at Second City, and that stage would quietly become Bill's future. Bill himself was never meant for a straight, predictable path. At St. Joseph's, he played sports and did just enough academically to move forward. He was drawn instead to stories of American outlaws and rule breakers: Wild Bill Hickok, a Kit Carson, Men Who Lived Outside Convention. That rebellious spark only grew stronger. At Loyola Academy, Bill played golf, formed a rock band called the Dutch Masters, and cracked jokes with classmates and teachers alike. He sang Beatles covers, improvised lyrics, and used music to escape grief. The band gave him a stage, and in many ways he never left it. In 1968, he moved to Denver to study pre-med at Regis College, but it didn't last. Homesickness hit hard, his grades collapsed. Eventually he hitchhiked back to Illinois, meeting strange, generous, and unforgettable people along the way. That journey taught him more than any classroom ever could. On his 20th birthday in 1970, Murray made a joke at O'Hare Airport about having bombs in his luggage. Security didn't laugh. They searched his bag and found nearly 10 pounds of marijuana, worth around $20,000. The arrest made the front page of the Chicago Tribune. Murray received probation and dropped out of college for good. Instead of spiraling, he pivoted. Brian opened a door at Second City, and in 1973, Bill joined the touring company. Within months, he was performing on the main stage alongside John Candy and Betty Thomas. Murray's style was raw and dangerous. He played offbeat lounge singers, mocked bar acts, and pushed boundaries. During one show, he broke a heckler's arm, then bought him a beer and drove him to the hospital. The story became legend. He wasn't polished or safe, but he was unforgettable. In 1974, he moved to New York and joined the National Lampoon Radio Hour with Gilda Radner, John Belushi, and Christopher Guest. The environment was chaotic, reckless, and perfect for him. He played absurd characters, set props on fire by accident, and constantly flirted with disaster. His first television break came with ABC's short-lived Saturday Night Live, hosted by Howard Cosell. There, he debuted his Nick the Lounge Singer routine, crooning badly through emotional ballads. The audience laughed, but true recognition took time. When he later auditioned for NBC's SNL, he bombed. Instead of rejecting him outright, producers offered him a writing job. He waited quietly until Chevy Chase left the show. Murray stepped in, stumbled at first, then slowly found his footing. By the 3rd season, he was indispensable. One of his most iconic sketches came in January 1977. When Murray appeared as Abraham Lincoln interviewing for a modern job, refusing to remove his stovepipe hat and answering HR questions in stiff 19th century language. The sketch felt dangerously awkward, like it could collapse at any moment. That tension became his signature. Over time, his deadpan delivery and unpredictable timing turned simple ideas into unforgettable moments. Behind the scenes, chaos followed him. Fireworks, pranks, producer feuds, and creative clashes piled up. By 1980, Murray had grown disillusioned with SNL and publicly criticized its direction. He left after 3 seasons, not quietly but in flames. Yet his film career was just beginning. Meatballs in 1979 turned him into a movie star. Caddyshack followed, fueled almost entirely by improvisation, including the legendary Cinderella monologue that wasn't in the script, but with success came volatility. On sets, Murray smashed props, clashed with co-stars, and pushed directors to their limits. His performance as Hunter S. Thompson in Where the Buffalo Roam blurred the line between role and reality. He carried the character with him long after filming ended. In Stripes, injuries, near-X ratings, and on-set tension became part of the process. Murray didn't just act, he detonated. By the mid-1980s, incidents piled up. On Ghostbusters, an improvised moment with Sigourney Weaver crossed boundaries and halted production. While the film became a global phenomenon, the story lingered quietly behind the scenes. In later projects like Scrooged and Quick Change, Murray's need for control and improvisation created chaos. On What About Bob? His behavior toward Richard Dreyfuss became so intense that production nearly collapsed. Groundhog Day marked a turning point. Exhausted and burned out, Murray poured his frustration into Phil Connors. Endless takes strained his relationship with director Harold Ramis, but the result was a film that became immortal. In the years that followed, Murray's career split in two: the unpredictable troublemaker and the quiet, wounded actor capable of something deeper. That depth emerged fully in Rushmore, The Royal Tenenbaums, and Lost in Translation. Directors like Wes Anderson and Sofia Coppola gave him space to be still, sad, and reflective. He worked for little money, showed up uninvited to events, and followed instinct instead of contracts. His whispered final line in Lost in Translation, revealed years later, felt like a confession: "Don't forget me." Yet the past never stayed buried. Lawsuits, royalty disputes, and rumors followed him. On later sets, clashes resurfaced. In 2022, production on Being Mortal was shut down after a crew member accused Murray of misconduct. A settlement followed. Murray called it a misunderstanding, but the fallout was severe. Projects disappeared. Reputation shifted. By 2025, Murray appeared at Sundance, not with jokes, but with reflection. He admitted to laziness, to waiting for roles instead of earning them, to playing destructive men as a form of penance. Indie films offered him small sparks of redemption, but the conversation around him had changed. The comedy legend who once thrived on chaos was now being forced to sit with it. Bill Murray built a career on unpredictability, rebellion, and walking the edge of collapse. For decades, it made him unforgettable. Now, the same traits are being re-examined under a harsher light. And for the first time, the question isn't whether he's funny, but whether the myth can survive the truth. The truth is, Bill Murray's career has always existed in the space between brilliance and damage. For years, Hollywood excused the volatility because the results were undeniable. He delivered moments no one else could, performances that felt alive because they were never fully controlled. Directors learned to either surrender to his instincts or brace for impact. Crews whispered warnings to each other. "That's just Bill" became a shield that protected behavior others would never get away with. But time has a way of stripping away shields. As the industry evolved, so did its tolerance. What once passed as eccentric genius began to look like entitlement. Younger actors, raised in a different Hollywood, didn't grow up idolizing chaos. They grew up watching careers end overnight because of it. Murray's habit of ignoring call sheets, refusing scripts, and improvising without consent slowly stopped being charming. It became a liability. Studios stopped laughing. Insurance companies started paying attention. The accusations that surfaced in the 2020s didn't arrive out of nowhere. They landed on a foundation that had been quietly cracking for decades. Stories that were once told as funny anecdotes, sunset explosions. Pranks gone wrong, physical intimidation were suddenly being retold with different emphasis. The punchlines disappeared. What remained were people who felt dismissed, embarrassed, or afraid. The culture had changed, but Murray hadn't changed with it fast enough. Murray, for his part, never issued a sweeping apology. Instead, he offered fragments, half reflections, half defenses. He spoke about misunderstanding, about different eras, about intent versus perception. At Sundance, he said he had been lazy, that he relied too much on his reputation to carry him. He admitted he'd stopped doing the work, stopped listening. But he also framed his past as something misread, taken out of context. To some, it sounded honest. To others, it sounded like avoidance. What complicated the narrative was that Murray didn't retreat into silence. He didn't disappear behind lawyers or PR statements. He showed up. He talked. he joked, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes uncomfortably. It was unclear whether that was courage or deflection. In an era where carefully worded apologies are the norm, Murray's rambling, unscripted responses felt almost anachronistic, like everything else about him. Privately, people who worked closely with him described a man who was deeply insecure beneath the bluster. A performer who never quite believed he deserved success, who tested limits because he expected rejection anyway. That insecurity mixed with power created a volatile combination. When he felt respected, he was generous and warm. When he felt challenged, he lashed out. It was never predictable which version would show up on set. Murray's personal life reflected the same instability. His marriage to Jennifer Butler ended quietly but painfully. Friends noticed he became more isolated afterward, harder to reach, more erratic. He stopped using agents and traditional management, relying instead on a voicemail system that became infamous. If he felt like working, he'd return a call. If not, projects died in limbo. It added to the mystique, but it also burned bridges. Studios don't like uncertainty, and Murray thrived on it as roles slowed. Murray leaned further into independent films, often playing men confronting regret, aging, and irrelevance. These weren't accidents. Characters like Don Johnston in Broken Flowers or Felix Kehoe in On the Rocks felt uncomfortably close to autobiography. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was exposing the cracks, perhaps hoping vulnerability would be enough to balance the past. But vulnerability without accountability has limits. The 2022 Being Mortal incident became a turning point not because it was unprecedented, but because it was documented, formalized, and handled publicly. Production shut down. Money was paid. The machine stopped protecting him. For the first time, Murray wasn't the one controlling the chaos. He was caught inside it. Some directors still defended him. They spoke of kindness, of moments where he lifted crew spirits, paid for meals, showed up unannounced just to make people laugh. Others stayed silent. Silence in Hollywood often says more than words. The gap between Murray's defenders and his critics grew wider, and the industry stopped pretending both sides could coexist comfortably. The internet, predictably, chose sides. Clips resurfaced. Old interviews were reanalyzed. Jokes were reframed as red flags. Fans struggled to reconcile the man who made them laugh during childhood with the man now facing serious criticism. Murray's films had soundtracked weddings, funerals, late nights, and lonely mornings. Letting go of that connection felt personal, almost like betrayal. Murray himself seemed aware of that bond. In one quiet moment at a Q&A, he said he understood why people were disappointed. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't demand understanding. He simply acknowledged the discomfort. It was one of the few moments where the room went completely still. By his mid-70s, Murray found himself in unfamiliar territory, rebuilding. Not his career in the traditional sense, those days were largely behind him, but his relationship with the work. Smaller films, shorter shoots, clearer boundaries. He spoke about wanting to be better to work with, about earning trust instead of assuming it. Whether that change came too late is still an open question. Hollywood, after all, has a short memory but a sharp survival instinct. It forgives easily when profit is guaranteed and forgets quickly when it isn't. Murray's box office draw has faded, replaced by a legacy that now carries an asterisk. Not erased, not fully condemned, but complicated, messy. Human, what remains undeniable is his influence. Generations of comedians studied his timing, his pauses, his ability to make silence funny. Actors learned from his willingness to look foolish, to let scenes breathe. Even his critics admit that no one quite replaced him. He carved out a lane so specific that it closed behind him. The question now isn't whether Bill Murray was great. That answer is already written into film history. The question is whether greatness excuses harm, whether impact outweighs intent, and whether redemption requires more than reflection. Murray's story is no longer just about comedy. It's about accountability in an industry that once worshipped rebellion and now demands responsibility as the spotlight dims. Murray stands as a relic of a different Hollywood, one built on excess, improvisation, and unchecked ego. Some will always defend that era. Others are glad it's gone. Murray exists in the tension between those views, neither villain nor victim, but a cautionary tale wrapped in laughter in the end. Bill Murray may be remembered not just for the characters he played, but for the questions his life now raises. About power, about forgiveness, about how long charm can outrun consequence, and whether a man who made millions laugh can ever fully reckon with the silence left behind when the laughter fades. As the years move forward, Bill Murray's place in Hollywood feels increasingly frozen in amber. He still appears at festivals, still drifts into projects that interest him, but the gravitational pull he once had is gone. Studios no longer chase him. Young directors no longer build films around his unpredictability. If he works now, it's because someone consciously chose the risk. Not because his name alone guarantees magic. That shift has forced Murray into something he rarely faced before: self-awareness without applause. For decades, laughter arrived instantly, even when things went wrong. A blown take could become legend. An argument could become mythology. Now, missteps echo longer than jokes. Silence follows where cheers once lived. That silence seems to haunt him more than criticism ever did. People close to him say he spends more time alone now. He golfs, reads, watches old movies, and replays moments in his head. Not just the triumphs, but the nights when someone walked off set, when a joke landed wrong, when he sensed the room turn against him and refused to adjust. In interviews, he's hinted at regret without naming specifics. He talks about missed chances, about not being as kind as he could have been. It's unclear whether that restraint comes from legal caution or emotional limitation. What's striking is that Murray never reinvented himself the way some of his peers did. He didn't chase respectability through prestige television or carefully curated public apologies. He didn't write a memoir to control the narrative. He never sat down for a definitive reckoning interview. In a strange way, that refusal feels consistent. Bill Murray has always resisted structure, even when structure might save him. Instead, his story has been written by fragments: crew accounts, leaked emails, festival comments, half-remembered anecdotes. There is no single version of Bill Murray, only overlapping truths. To some, he's generous, playful, and deeply sensitive. To others, he's volatile, dismissive, and unsafe. Both can be true. That contradiction may be the most honest summary of him. In film history, Murray occupies a rare space. He bridged eras from the lawless experimentation of 1970s comedy to the introspective melancholy of 2000s indie. Few actors managed that transition. Fewer still did it while remaining unmistakably themselves. His best performances didn't come from transformation, but from revelation. He let the cracks show long before Hollywood made vulnerability fashionable, yet those same cracks widened with time. What once read as melancholy matured into bitterness. What once felt rebellious began to feel entitled. Murray's refusal to evolve socially, even as his art deepened, created an imbalance. The work grew quieter. The behavior stayed loud. There's a sense now that Murray understands this, at least partially. In recent appearances, he speaks less, listens more. When asked about his legacy, he deflects. When asked about controversy, he doesn't fight it head-on. He lets the discomfort sit. That may not satisfy critics or repair damage, but it suggests a man finally aware that charm is no longer enough. Whether redemption is possible remains uncertain. Hollywood loves comeback narratives, but only when they follow a script: apology, accountability, transformation, return. Murray has never followed scripts well. If there is a final act to his story, it likely won't arrive neatly packaged. It may come quietly in a small performance, a restrained role, or simply in how people who work with him describe the experience afterward. For audiences, the challenge is separating memory from reality. The Bill Murray who made them laugh still exists on screen, preserved forever in moments of brilliance. But the man behind those moments is aging, flawed, and complicated. Holding both truths at once isn't easy, but it may be necessary in the end. Bill Murray's legacy won't be decided by a single scandal or a single apology. It will be shaped by the full arc of his life: his talent, his damage, his refusal to be contained, and his late, uneasy reckoning with consequence. He once thrived on being unpredictable. Now, unpredictability is no longer a shield. It's the final question mark hanging over a career that gave the world laughter and left behind a trail of unresolved echoes.